Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Life Science Rundown. This is Nick Catman with the FDA Group. Before we jump into our discussion for today, just a little bit about the FDA Group. We help life science companies in the areas of quality assurance, regulatory affairs, clinical operations, commissioning, qualification, and validation, as well as manufacturing and engineering. In each of these areas, we have 3 different engagement models: staff augmentation, consulting, and full-time employee recruitment. So if you ever find yourself in need, just head over to the FDAgroup.com and check us out and get in touch. So today I am speaking with Trey Thorsen. Trey, thank you very much for hopping on today.
Hey, Nick, thanks. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. So today we're going to talk about 510Ks and kind of some of the frequently asked questions that everybody wants to know that's in that arena. So before we hop into that, maybe you can just give me a little bit of background about yourself and your experience in the arena, and then we'll kind of go through things.
Sure. I've been in regulatory about 15, 16 years. I first started out in the industry as an analytical chemist in the analytical lab, and I was doing that for about 10 years. Then I was fortunate enough to work for a very small company. I was employee number 6. So that allowed me to broaden my horizons, if you will, by necessity, because we all had to wear a lot of different hats. And I found out that I really enjoyed regulatory affairs, and that led me to take enroll in a master's program at the University of Georgia. So I have a master's degree in regulatory affairs, which I got that in 2009, and since then haven't looked back. And I've worked in, like I said, this very small companies. I've worked in large companies such as Stryker and St. Jude, which is now Abbott. And I've got experience of class 1, 2, and 3 devices from the FDA standpoint.
Yep, excellent. Well, we're certainly thrilled that we have access to you as a consultant, and we've had some really good success in helping clients that need 510Ks. So I'm really glad that we're connected. So there's different areas that I wanted to go through. The first one is talking about distributors. Then I wanted to get into foreign manufacturers, registration, and then quality systems. So that's
Sure.
kind of where I was thinking. So we'll start here. I would like to distribute a manufacturer's product under my own company name. Do I need to submit a 510K?
No, you don't. However, what you need to do is if you're this distributor, you want to make sure that your name is on the label. So, and you would say distributed by or manufactured for and your company name, because you want to identify who is actually putting the product on the market. And along with that, you want to, if you're a distributor of a product, you want to make sure that you have a quality agreement in place with the manufacturer, because you want to understand who owns the label, who owns the design specifications, who's responsible for complaints. So you want to make sure that is all laid out and agreed upon before you even put their product on the market.
Awesome. For foreign manufacturers, can foreign companies submit a pre-market notification 510K?
Yes, they can. They can definitely do that. They follow the requirements for a 510K. They still have to pay the MDUFMA fee, which for 2023 510K fee is a standard fee is $19,870, and the small business fee is $4,967. Now, the difference between the standard fee and the small business fee is if a small business is defined as a business who has less than $100 million in sales for the most recent tax year. So you can file with the FDA, you can send in application till they review your tax information, and they will give you that certification. It's basically a number that you'll get. It takes about 60 days for the FDA to review that. You put that on your, when you register or you submit to the fees for the 510K review fee, you put that number on that information and you'll get to pay a reduced fee.
I know this is one of the common questions that people have. Other than that fee and any other fees that they decide to pay a consultant that would help them put all this together, are there any other fees that people should be aware of?
Yes. Any manufacturer, if you're putting a device on the market in the United States, you have to register as an establishment with the FDA. And that's an annual review fee. That's an annual fee. It goes up every year. I think this year it's somewhere around 6,000, and some change. So that is another fee that you have to pay. And also one other thing regarding foreign manufacturers is you need to have a U.S. agent. And basically, the U.S. agent has to have a place of business in the United States. And that U.S. agent is responsible for any FDA questions about imported devices or helping schedule FDA inspections. You also have to have an official correspondent. And this is someone who makes sure that the establishment is registered, the annual registrations, or deals with any establishment device listings, any new devices that the company puts on the market. So that's another reason that a consultant or consulting firm can help a foreign business. They can be the same person. The agent and the official correspondent can be the same person. And again, that's where a consulting firm can help you.
What have you seen in terms of the cost for the U.S. agent?
It all depends on the firm and who you go with. So it's not really a structure. To me, it's not really structured. It's not guaranteed. It's not an established fee by the FDA. So it all depends on the firm.
Yep. Registration. Do I need to register my facility before I submit a 510K?
You do not. Companies are required to register within 30 days of manufacturing or distributing the device. So you do not have to be registered with the FDA. However, let me make sure that everybody's aware of this, because they think, okay, great. We got a 510K, we registered with the FDA, no problem. When you register with the FDA in its establishment, no matter what risk class the device is, you're letting the FDA know that, hey, we're here. We're open for an inspection if your name gets to be pulled out of the hat.
Right. Quality systems. Do I need to provide documentation that my facility complies with the quality system in my 510K?
No, you don't have to show proof of a quality management system. However, it's good to do that, because you are required to follow design controls, supplier controls, and things like that. In the 510K, there is a truth and accuracy statement. And that is basically saying to the FDA that, yep, everything in here is true and accurate, which that wouldn't be true if you didn't have design controls in place and things like that. So they kind of go hand in hand. You don't have to show proof, but you need to have it in place.
Do I need to have my facility inspected to the quality system regulations before I submit a 510K?
No, you don't. However, it's a good thing to do. People, I think, in my experience anyway, people look at an inspection, as a bad thing. I don't think it really is. I mean, especially if you hire a consulting firm to come in and do an audit of your quality management system, because that's basically, you're doing your internal audit, annual internal audit, and you're preparing yourself for an FDA inspection. So you have a third party come in and look at your system, who they have they're not really familiar with your system, so they can look and identify gaps. And if there's low hanging fruit that's very visible, why not take care of it before the FDA does?
Good point. I wanted to talk about some other common questions I get just in terms of timeline. So when somebody is thinking about submitting a 510K, generally they'll reach out to a firm like the FDA group and ask for kind of a broad overview of what can I expect from beginning to end. So for somebody that really has no background in this, how would you, in a simple manner, explain, here are the steps that you need to take, and here are the timelines that you can expect?
Sure. So I spoke earlier about design controls. So let's just say that however long it takes you to develop and design your device and then prove all your testing. So that's one section that it all depends on what the device is, right? So it could be several years, it could be several months. It all depends on the device. But from the FDA review standpoint, by law, they have 90 days to review a traditional 510K. So some people assume that, oh, great, it's just 90 days. Not actually, because once you send in the 510K, the FDA's time clock starts. And they have, like I said, 90 days to review that. If they have any questions or any type of issues with the 510K, they will send you a request for additional information. And that stops that time clock. So you have 180 days once you receive that additional information request to answer the FDA's questions. And so typically what I tell people is that you have anywhere from 3 months to about 6 months, maybe 8 months to get your clearance, depending on the severity of the questions or the lack of information that you provided.
Are there other entities that can help speed up that review process outside of the FDA?
Sure, there are third-party review facilities, if you will, that have been verified by the FDA to look at those, to look at submissions for you. There's also a special 510K program or process. That is when you use your device, your company's device as a predicate. And that is a 30-day review time frame. But again, if the FDA asks for additional information, that time clock stops. So it could prolong it a little bit.
What are some of the positives and negatives to that program? Why would somebody choose to utilize it, and why wouldn't they?
The positives, I think, are the review timeline. You're not making, and the idea or the intent is you're not making a major change to the indications for use or the intended use for your device. If you do that, that's going to mean that you have to get another predicate that is probably outside of your company, and then to do a traditional 510K. But it's it's basically you're building on your product. And you can add some additional features or bells and whistles if you like, as long as it doesn't in fact, the intended use or indications for use.
How do companies go about identifying predicates, and have you seen any changes from FDA in terms of what they found acceptable in the past and what they find acceptable today?
That's a good question. Typically, and it all varies depending, you can probably get away with 2 predicates. 3 are pushing it, because that's, if you get more than 3, I think the FDA looks at it and you're kind of Frankensteining your product, right? So taping a lot of different things together and see if it's going to work. And you're like, wait a minute, that's really not going to happen. I think that's a good thing, looking at keeping your predicates, maybe at least 2 predicates. So,
what are kind of the general pitfalls that would be common to somebody filing a 510K for a first time?
Having all of your verification data performed, also biocompatibility. That's a really big hot button with the FDA nowadays, is you want to make sure that you have the appropriate biocompatibility testing performed. It's always good, and I tell people this, if you have questions, you can submit what's called a pre-sub to the FDA. And that is basically, you want to get FDA's alignment on your predicate strategy, your testing strategy, and they'll be able to answer your questions depending on all the information that you give them. They'll answer your questions based on what you provide them, and they'll say, yes, we agree, or no, we don't agree. And then you'll have to go and find another predicate. And basically, that is just getting on the FDA's website and looking at the devices under that product code. So you basically just do a lot of searching. for your predicate, and that's pretty much it.
Is a pre-sub a requirement, and are there any fees associated with a pre-sub?
No, there are no fees associated with the pre-sub, and it's not a requirement. It's a really good idea. I think it's a very good idea, and it also helps expedite your timeline, your testing timeline. Going back to the question you asked earlier about the timeline, let's just say you perform these expensive animal tests and verification tests, and then you submit a 510K, and the FDA comes back and says, hey, sorry, we don't, this isn't right, we need some more testing. So in a pre-sub, you can ask the FDA questions. Do you agree with our testing strategy? Do you see any issues with the testing strategy? And then you can communicate with the FDA. And it also gives the FDA a good idea what your device is early. So they're like, oh yeah, I've seen this. So
what would you tell someone that's debating on whether or not to do a pre-sub? In what circumstances would you encourage it, and what circumstances would you not encourage it?
I think a pre-sub is a very good idea if you have questions. If your predicate strategy is not very clear, if it's a very clear path and you're comparing 1-to-1 and you can always say, yep, we're equivalent here, yep, we're equivalent here. I think I think a pre-sub is not very helpful. Maybe a little bit of wasted time. But if you have some questions on your testing strategy, your biocompatibility, maybe you're not able to make a really good equivalence argument with your predicate, submit a pre-sub to the FDA and just get their buy-in before you spend all the money and waste all the time.
For somebody that's looking at doing a 510K, what would you say to someone that is considering doing it themselves versus thinking about outsourcing it to somebody that does this?
No, that's a good question. Small companies, they have limited resources, and I'm not saying it's impossible to submit a 510K without someone has regulatory knowledge, but it is very beneficial. Because it goes back to the questions the FDA would ask. If you're a company and you don't really have a good idea about regulatory affairs, you may have some mistakes. You may not include some things. There's some testing you may not include. So I would highly recommend using an experienced consulting firm to get a 510K cleared.
One of the things that we've seen recently is a lot of companies coming out with software as a medical device. What differences if any, are there between a 510K for a software as a medical device versus a standard medical device?
That's a good question. It all depends, and it all depends on the level of risk. So there's software. Everybody knows that software is just everywhere nowadays. So there's the difference between software in a medical device. That is, you can have that in a 510K, but there's a specific section for software that is in a medical device, like the software that controls an infusion pump or something like that actually runs the pump. But software as a medical device, that's a good question, because there's a lot of different variables regarding software as a medical device nowadays. You can have software as a medical device in a watch, so there's different risk areas depending on what the indication for use is, what the intended use is, what you're treating, the disease or mitigation you're trying to treat. So it's pretty much an open book, to be honest. And here is where you would need the support from a consulting firm if you don't have in-house regulatory team.
What are some other questions that I haven't asked that you see from people that you speak to that would be worthwhile bringing up in this conversation?
Sure. Now, here recently, the 510K process, there is what the FDA calls as an E-Star template. And that is a template to submit to the FDA. It's electronic. It's all electronic. There are specific sections in that E-Star template that you fill in. That is similar to the traditional way we would do 510Ks. Prior to this template, you would have to draft your 510K, PDF everything, put it on a thumb drive, mail it to the document control center in Maryland, and wait until you got a acknowledgement letter from the FDA. Now you have this template that the FDA has developed, which I think is it's very convenient. You attach your testing documentation, you fill out specific questions, and depending on, if you have sterilization, if you have biocompatibility testing, that you have little bullet points that you click, and the FDA's template will drop down boxes where you fill that out, and you submit it through their portal, and within 15 minutes they have it, and you get the acknowledgement letter. If not that day, the day after. So I think it's going to help the process tremendously.
Awesome. Anything else you care to share?
I think going back to the small businesses, it's very, very, very good idea to enlist the help of a consulting firm when you're developing your 510K. There's so many questions and so many pitfalls, and not saying it's not negotiable to get through as you're a small business, but I'm telling you, the frustration with that process, if you don't know what you're doing, can kill you. So it's very, very helpful to use a consulting firm to help you.
Great point. Well, I really enjoyed this conversation. I thought it was a great opportunity for us in a very short amount of time to be able to talk about what some of those really common questions are for people that are entering into this space for the first time, or maybe the second, third, fourth time, just so that they're aware of some of the basics that they need to understand before engaging. So Trey, I want to thank you very much. As always, if you find conversations like this valuable, please share it with a colleague or your professional network. If you haven't already, subscribe to get updates of new episodes at thefdagroup.com/podcast, and follow the FDA Group on LinkedIn. If you'd like to connect about project or resource needs, such as helping you with 510K, head over to thefdagroup.com to get in touch, or feel free to connect with me personally on LinkedIn. I'm Nicholas Catman. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you all next time.